we live? Okay. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Standards Committee meeting. Before we go on, actually, if any one of you has a mobile that's not switched off or silent, can you do so now, please? And I'm doing mine as well at the same time, just to say that I practice what I preach. Okay, do we have any apologies at all?
Chair, I have no apologies.
Okay. Late items to be introduced by the chair. Well, I have no late items to introduce. Declarations of interest? No? Okay. Minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of November last year.
Move as printed, please, Chair.
Anybody second that?
Yeah, I can't second that because I wasn't there. So.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. That Local Government Association Model Council Code of Conduct, which is attached, I guess everybody's read it. Anybody like to make any comments on it?
Yes, please.
Yes, Philip.
There is a comment somewhere online on number 9, I think, about social media and the use of social media. I mean, I think what we have at the moment does not include anything on social media, and quite clearly something needs to be in social media, because quite a number of the complaints we get involve at some stage or other past something on social media. So whether we have a separate section or just incorporate social media in every single plate, it's quite important, I think, that is put in there. And I don't know if we need to reference anything to do with remote meetings as well, because I mean, quite clearly, standards of a remote meetings is quite as important as well. The fact that we need to ensure that we're in a secure area. We don't have anybody else in the meeting if we're going to the part 2 of the agenda, for instance. There's all sorts of things like that related to online meetings, which perhaps, I don't know whether that fits into the code of conduct anywhere, but certainly the social media one would need to be included in as much detail as we can get in there.
Yes, Philip, I'm sure Emily can put us right on this.
Thank you very much, Philip. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have to say that as a group of Democratic Services officers, we were disappointed actually by the lack of reference to social media in the Model Code of Conduct when it was published. Having been quite a lot of discussion about social media and the fact that it is a sort of rich source of complaints, it didn't end up being covered in any particular detail. Those of you who have looked at Appendix 1 to the report will have seen that there has been a group formed by the monitoring officers across the city and the county, and also at the Fire Authority, to discuss actually how we incorporate the Model Code of Conduct into our existing codes of conduct. And it was also expressed at that meeting that there was a disappointment that there weren't specific provisions relating to social media developed in the Model Code. We all agreed that we need those provisions, and we are going to work to incorporate some. And so that is a work in progress for us. In terms of your comment about remote meetings, I think you raise a very valid point, Philip. And obviously, once we know what the situation is going to be long term in relation to ongoing, what we hope will be ongoing use of remote and hybrid meetings going forward, I think it is appropriate for us to consider some specific drafting, even if it is simply to link across to the remote meeting procedure rules with some additional provisions about the importance of respect and making sure you're in a private space for meetings which are held in private session. So I agree with both points. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure, Philip, we can sort of incorporate some of that for our next municipal year. I mean, I don't think any of us on 23rd of March last year envisaged that we will still be meeting like this year. But such are the times that maybe for at least the next few months, this will be the course of action I will have to take and look into, as you said, improving the code for meetings, whether they're on Skype or Zoom, and also for anything else. Okay,
I mean, quite clearly, if it's a hybrid meeting, if some people are in the office and some people are on things, there's additional security implications there for security. Some people will be in a circulation, some people won't be, but it's a mixture. But it's something that obviously will need to be borne in mind. As we discussed before the meeting, I mean, there was some talk about, in some way, I'm sure online meetings will continue inevitably to a certain extent. So there will need to be something in there, and obviously we'll need to consider it in due course. Thank you.
Well, it's a question of needs must, Philip, but I hope when we're back at the council house that it won't be a hybrid meeting, because if we're allowed to be there, then I certainly, would like to see everybody in that room. What I don't want a situation is without reason for half the people attending and the other half at home or wherever. Hybrid, yes, in times of necessity or for situations that are for medical reasons or whatever, but I don't think I'd approve of it by choice.
No, fair enough. Thank you.
Number 6, item 6 is summary of progress with member complaints. Will that be you giving us an update, Emily?
Yes, I mean, obviously there is a report at this part of the meeting, and then there's a further report in the exempt part of the meeting. Was there anything? Actually, Chair, can we just go back? Was everyone comfortable with the recommendations in the report?
No. Can I say something?
Yeah, we haven't just resolved to whether everyone's happy with the recommendations.
What I was going to say is that independent persons have a wider responsibility, other than just to consider complaints, to be generally supportive of ethical standards in the council. And I wondered, therefore, if when it came to the recommendations, independent persons could be added to those who are consulted while you are considering these, so that when the recommendations come to the next standards committee, the independent persons will have had a chance to say something at a preparation stage, rather than perhaps all four of us having to make particular points at the meeting itself.
Chair, I would have no issue with that. I think it would be a sensible suggestion to allow advanced consultation with the IPs.
Yes, I think that's a very valid suggestion. Actually, it would probably sort of help in making the decision whether to sort of progress the complaint further or not. It certainly would be nice to have an independent view of it. Are we okay with the item number 5 that we went back to the code of conduct then? Is everybody okay with that?
Chair, I think Stuart's indicating in the instant messenger.
Okay, yeah,
This
Stuart,
item,
sorry, I didn't see
Stuart.
that.
No, not at all, Chair. Thank you, Stephen.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems that the independents are kind of hugging this one up to now, aren't we? Just to add to Peter's point there, happy to support the committee and indeed the council in any way that you guys consider we can as independents. Just to make the underpinning point that I wouldn't want the independent members to be asked or indeed expect to be able to do things that are within the remit of the elected members. This is local democracy after all. The independent persons aren't elected. The elected members are, and therefore should have primacy in these matters. So happy to help out, happy to support Peter's point, but the committee has primacy here. The committee votes on what it needs to vote on. The elected members should have primary responsibility for standards.
Chair, may I comment?
Yes, Emily.
I think under recommendation 2.2, I would develop a amendments to the councillor's code of conduct, which I would then consult with yourself as chair, and if agreed by members of committee, the IPs, we would then bring that finalised code of conduct back to report it into committee for finalisation before it was taken to full council for agreement. So it wouldn't, that consultation would not take away the primacy of the committee.
No, I think maybe, Stuart, we're across purposes, or I am. I thought that you meant, at the initial stage. I mean, there's no way that, I don't mean to be sort of rude or unkind in any way, but there wouldn't be any scenario where independent members would have sort of a say-so, in the same amount as local councillors would, right? But there is no harm in seeking opinion on that.
Okay, that's great, Chair. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Right, are we all okay with that now then?
Can I speak on it?
Yes, you can.
Right, okay. We've heard from Philip, and I think he made a very good point about about social media, and what was the other bit that he talked about?
Consultation with the IPs,
Consultation with the IPs. I actually think that we should have that as a recommendation somewhere in the recommendation, to say that we specifically want to talk about social media and consulting with the IPs, rather than just rubber stamp what's on there, because we've had a discussion about this where somebody has raised something and we're just saying, okay, well we will do that, but it's not in the recommendation, it's not in the paper, and so I think we actually should put that in.
Councillor Graves, at Appendix 1, row 9, the recommendation, the suggested actions says recommend that explicit reference to social media and examples are incorporated within the councillor's code of conduct. So it is within there. So the recommendation at 2.2 is for the monitoring officer to in consultation with the chair, to prepare amendments to the councillor's code of conduct for approval that reflect the suggested actions detailed in Appendix 1. So what is proposed is that I amend the code of conduct in line with Appendix 1, and that specifically says that we deal with social media in there.
Right, okay.
And then the idea was, I think what was also suggested was that in 2.2, after in consultation with the Chair's Standards Committee, is added the words "and the independent persons."
Okay.
Is that clear enough, Alan?
Yes.
Okay.
So Councillor Carney, I think you need to check with the committee are happy with the recommendation 2.1 and 2.2 as it's proposed to be amended.
Yes, I was just about to say that. Are we all happy with the recommendations?
Yep, happy with that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, all good with me. Thank you.
Okay, then. Thank you. Can we now move to item 6? Summary of progress. I know you said we'll have to go back to it in item 8 as well, Emily. But if there's anything quickly that we can report before the press are excluded.
Well, I would just have members had an opportunity to read the report as drafted at item 6.
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask a question? I mean, sometimes I do think that our agendas are a little bit topsy-turvy. I mean, we've got item 6, which we need to agree. The recommendation is to note the information contained in the report. And yet, when we talk in the private section of this, we may want to raise a few things. So it seems a bit odd that we're noting it here and agreeing to that recommendation, and yet might disagree with it, or might want to say something else in the second part of the meeting, where we're talking about the detail of the report.
Yeah, well, I agree. I mean, I'm looking at it myself, the agenda, and it's basically the same wording for items 6 and 8.
So can we have some advice as to how we could get around that?
Emily?
Well, the report is a noting report of in any case, isn't it? So it's for you to note the progress, and the minutes and within the minutes you can capture any specific comments that you have in relation to those complaints as discussed, and they will be noted in the minutes of the private session.
Right, okay.
But what if we want to do something more than note the report?
Well, I think Emily just said if you want to make comments about the report, then you can do so when we get to item 8 after the exclusion of the public and press.
Right, but this is why I think it's a bit topsy-turvy, because if we disagree with the recommendation to note the report, we can't really discuss that in detail because it's in the open part of the meeting.
This partly, though, is the difficulty of a remote meeting, I suspect, Councillor Graves, in that once we have gone into private session, we cannot then go back into open session. So we kind of have to deal with it in this way. I agree that if we were in the chamber, I suppose we could go into private session, clear the chamber, then come out of private session, invite people back into the chamber, and then go into private session again later on. But we can't do that with the remote meeting technology. So we have to do it in this way, I'm afraid, which I agree is slightly topsy-turvy, to take your expression, but I think is the reality of how we need to deal with it.
Could we not have as item 6 as to defer the recommendation to item 8?
I see no particular issue with that. Alex, Stephen, do you have a view on that?
No, I'd agree if Councillor Graves wants to propose an alternative recommendation to the one published in the report, provided that it's seconded and the committee agrees with it, then that is obviously at the committee's discretion. Obviously, anything that is the resolution that will be publicly available would read that you deferred consideration of the report, and then obviously whatever you subsequently agreed in private session wouldn't be open to public inspection. So obviously it is entirely at the committee's discretion to change the officer recommendation in the report if you want to do so.
Well, look, can we agree to change it while we're, as long as we're in sort of a situation where we have to have this type of meeting, and then, as Emily said earlier, go back to the procedure when we're back in the chamber? Is everybody okay with that?
Well, I mean, I think Councillor Graves has proposed, if you follows how Alex just described that, it would just be amending it for the purposes of this meeting. It would be amending the report as drafted, and we could take that into consideration when considering drafting future reports going forward.
Okay. Are you all in favour of that then?
Yeah, I'll second that, Chair.
Okay.
Can I just check Councillor Graves, could you just go over what you want to how you want to amend the recommendation as drafted at item 6?
To change 2.1 to defer the recommendation to item 8 on the agenda.
Is there a seconder for that?
Yes, I'll second that, Emily.
Fine.
So we got second, third and fourth on that. Right, okay, then shall we sort of adopt that then? Is everybody okay with that recommendation for tonight's meeting? Yeah? Is everybody on silent?
Yes, that's fine.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Okay, then we'll go to item 7 then, which is, well, we'll have to exclude the press and members of the public. So would you like to read the section, or do you want me to read it, Alex?
Chair, it's Stephen here, Democratic Services Officer. I'll read it out, Chair.
Okay.
So this is to consider a resolution to exclude the press and public during consideration of the following item, that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following item on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 1 and 2 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information.
Okay, thank you, Stephen.
If we have agreement on that, Chair. I'll wait for my colleague Dominic, who will confirm when the live broadcast has ended.
I take it nobody